You see Devon Witherspoon walking out with my old number, and it looks good. And Bobby Wagner. Got Pete Carroll. This is going to be a fun. Again, we're going to be looking at some of the new acquisitions along the way. But before we get started on that, I just want to give you guys some updates on the pub list. We had Pete Carroll yesterday talk about some of the players, particularly the most important guys on this team. One being Jamal Adams, and as you know, he tore his quadricep tendon in Week 1 last season, and that's just a long recovery time. And also Jordan Brooks, who tore his ACL last year late into the season. Both now, though, are running and making great progress. And the team is obviously being very careful with them and how they bring them back along the way. But let me bring my crew in here with Ray Roberts and John Boyle, and want to welcome you guys in. John, first of all, man, just your thoughts on training camp so far. You are in the throes of this, right? You get the inside look more than anybody.
Yeah, I mean, we're out here in the middle of it. It's a lot of fun. Obviously, it's an exciting time of year every year, but especially when you're coming off a season like last one where there was just, maybe not as high expectations for some people, and you come out, you have a great year, and everybody just feels really, really good coming into this season. So, yeah, it's always such a fun time of year to be out here enjoying camp.
Are you guys, either one of you, are you worried about the timing of potentially getting Jamal Adams back and Jordan Brooks? Look, they're running. I mean, that's a positive. They're going to be back. I think Pete, listening to him yesterday, he's cautious. He wants to make sure these two are absolutely ready for the season.
Yeah, and I've had both of those. Well, I haven't had a quadricep tear, but I had a patella tendon tear, which is really similar, and I've also torn both of my ACLs. And so obviously the rehab and all that stuff is different nowadays than then, but it does take a while, not only just for the physical piece to come back, but for the mental piece to come back. And those positions require a lot of stop and go and changing directions and all those kinds of things. So you have to be comfortable in all of those situations with coming back from those injuries. So it is really good that the Seahawks have some people in place and other players here that can play those positions and be really good at it. But it would be, to me, like I said on Wednesday, Jamal is always an intriguing piece to me because he can, when he is on his game and you have him where he's supposed to be, he is such a difference maker.
Yeah, one encouraging thing, the way Pete Carroll talked about it, really sounds like these guys are getting close. I mean, close doesn't mean they're back on the practice field tomorrow or anything like that, but just that they are running, they're cutting. I mean, I think if the average fan just watched them working out, you wouldn't necessarily know that they're still coming back from an injury, but there's still a ways to go from running and cutting to having all the strength you need, being able to do all the football stuff, and then just building up to being in shape for football. So, whether either of these guys is on the field week 1, we don't know yet, but I don't think it's going to be, a huge chunk of the season either way for both. And as Ray just said, I think they really like a lot of the depth they put into both those positions, especially we're going to talk about the secondary. They got a ton of good players in that secondary. So you love to have Jamal Adams out there. He's a big part of what you do, but you do also feel really good about the pieces you have out there. It's coming soon, and he'll be out there quickly. And I mean, it's kind of cool though to see all the other guys while they're missing some guys. I mean, you got Trey Brown back, who we didn't see a lot of last year. You've got, you got Mike Jackson, who's coming off a great offseason. He's out there with the ones right now. So a lot of fun guys to see.
Yeah, and I think, for Reek, it's also the dude is so thirsty for knowledge. Like that's what, like what you're just saying, John. It's like, and he's very raw, and so you don't want him to miss too much time of like just being out there getting the reps, getting the coaching, because he is in a place where he's so receptive to what he's been taught that you don't want to lose that in any kind of capacity.
Well, another big news, and excited. There he is, the man right there. The 12s welcome back future Hall of Famer Bobby Wagner after spending last season with the Rams, which, again, I still can't see him in that uniform.
It did not look right.
And he even said that, I'm just excited I got back in the right colors back on me. And so, you're seeing Bobby right there. That it feels right again, doesn't it?
It really – go ahead, Ray.
No, I was going to say the thing about Bobby being back this time is like – I don't know. You can feel like the ambassador in him. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like I don't want to call him like a grandfather because he's not that. But to some of these dudes, he's an older guy, and he feels like he's kind of embraced that a little bit. Even the way just today watching him walk through the facility, he just had a different kind of move to how he was moving. And so I would imagine that with some of these players here that. The guys that have played with him excited to have him back, but then some of these dudes for them to learn from. Such a great player.
I love how much you're trying to avoid the word old there.
Right, I was. Like, I've been that dude.
You don't want Bobby hearing that.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's great to see him back. And look, I mean, the guy showed last year he is still a playmaker, still put up great numbers. And to me, more than anything, I think he's just going to bring some calm and stability to this defense. I mean, we look at the issues they had when they were really up and down last year. They'd have some great games and they'd have some bad games. And I think, some of that was guys and, just not making plays. But I think sometimes you just need that steady and force middle linebacker making sure everybody's in the right place, knows what they're doing, and nobody in football is better than Bobby Wagner at that.
Yeah, I think for some of these guys, it's just there's somebody they all looked up to when they watched him, right? I mean, this is a Hall of Fame player. And you look, his work ethic, his physical attributes are still there. I don't know how much we're going to see him practicing, but he's going to be playing a lot this year, and he's going to be, the center focus for us. Another thing, bringing back another old guy, I guess, not really that old, but an old Seahawk, and that's Jarran Reed. And one of the big things on that, what we found out yesterday from Pete Carroll, is they're moving him to nose tackle, which I think is brilliant. Here's a guy who was listed as defensive end in our 3-4 scheme. He played tackle it and really kind of flexed a little bit with the 4-3. But the one thing about a nose tackle we didn't have last year was a threat to rush the passer, and that they got to really isolate him. The run game, I thought Al Woods did a pretty good job, but we got no penetration in the passing game. So just your guys' thoughts on that news. With him yesterday, he was lined between Mario Edwards Jr. and Dremont Jones.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great move because, like you said, Al Woods was great against the run, but he wasn't the pass rusher that you needed. And when you can get both guards in the center covered in a 3-4 or 5-man front, then you put a lot of pressure on the center to have to snap the ball and pass block or run block. And if you have a guy like Jarran, who's an established player who has shown that he can rush the quarterback, you give him a chance to rush against the center over his snap hand. You can create a lot of issues for a lot of offenses. So I think it's a great move to put a guy with that type of skill and that type of size over the center. Because when we went from Al Woods to like Poona Ford, like it was such a big drop off, even just in the size of the person playing over the nose. And so I think Jarran Reed playing over the center will be a good productive move for the Seahawks defensive line.
Yeah, I mean, this is a guy who's got a 10-sack season under his belt, and so you add that threat in the middle, that's big. And you also, they're going to need some big body guys. Brian Monet, when he's back, is the most obvious, for that run stopping. But if you have the quicker guy who can get you some pass rush, that's great. And also, quite frankly, you put him in there, and you're addressing a need right now because Brian Monet's hurt, because they've got some other guys dinged up at that position. Obviously, you lost Al Woods this offseason. So, if all of a sudden you get him in nose and you're getting, Dremont Jones and Mario Edwards out there with him, you're just getting better guys overall on the field at the same time. So I like that idea. Get him in there, and we'll see how he does with it.
I think the one thing you look at this defensive line is they just look more athletic.
Yeah.
You look at Jarran Reed, you slide him from defensive end, and I was just looking at our defensive ends, just their size. We're 6'3", 6'3", 6'3", 6'6", 6'3". You don't always see that.
Right.
A lot of times, you're looking for speed rushers outside. And now you move Jarran Reed in to the nose where, he's over 300 pounds. He's a great football player. I mean, that's what people don't remember probably or have forgotten. When we lost him, that was a big deal. I mean, we did not replace him. And so with this new scheme, and Pete's excited. He said, look, we're basically going to be building our defense around that nose spot. And Jarran he's just a huge part to it. So excited about the defensive line and the makeup there. Switched a little bit to wide receiver now. A lot of talk about him, and that's D. Eskridge in this offseason. Second-round pick a couple of years ago. He's had a bunch of injuries, just hasn't had the opportunity really to shine yet. But his offseason's been spectacular. I brought up, baseball analogies. Everybody talks about Jaron Kelenic in the offseason, and they kept talking about it and talking about it and talking about it. You finally said, oh, there's something going on here.
Right.
And everybody's talking about D over and over. And, Geno Smith talked about him yesterday, and DK Metcalf talked about him yesterday. But, John, you're here, man. You've seen the offseason and what he could do. And, now, again, you get a first-round pick with a JSN. That's going to be a battle, but there's depth there.
Yeah, I mean, talent has never been the issue for D. Eskridge. It's just been a series of unfortunate injuries, and it's even when he has been healthy, I just don't think he's ever had the continuous time on the practice field, build up the time with the quarterbacks, just get comfortable. And now we're seeing it of a full healthy offseason, comes to camp. He was great in OTAs. All of a sudden he's on the field for camp, has a great first day of camp. Just some big splash plays, showing off that speed, the explosiveness. So, again, he's got to prove it. I get fans are going to be skeptical until we see him out there healthy for a big chunk of the regular season. But if he can keep this going, all of a sudden you look at, a first-round pick's going to play. Jackson Smith-Njigba is going to be out there. But I don't think it's just a given that he's going to be that number 3 guy getting all the snaps. If somebody like Eskridge is playing this well, I think you're going to have a lot of guys really pushing for playing time, and just makes them that much better on offense.
Yeah, and if you look at the wide receiver group, like that third wide receiver, there's always been some injury stuff with that spot too. So the guys they've had play there get hurt, then you have to find someone, Penny Hard or whoever that was coming in trying to play that 3 spot. So to have someone else like Eskridge, who has, to me, I've always been excited about what will happen once he catches the ball, because he has kind of like a running back body and a running back skill set. So after the catch, it's going to be a big deal for him. And I think last year before he got injured, they were trying to get the ball in his hands. I think he ran a couple fly sweeps and stuff like that to try to get the ball into his hands. And then his rookie year, doing some of the mock games, he had a couple good plays. So having that type of if he can stay healthy and having him competing for the number 3 receiver in case someone gets hurt, I think it adds to depth and some explosiveness in that position.
And he was also returning kickoffs before he got hurt last year. So, that's another area they could look to get him the ball more often too.
Yeah, I think of Doug Baldwin since we've lost him. One of the statistics that hasn't looked very good is our third down conversions over the years. And that's the closest guy to the quarterback, right? It's that direct line that you can. And usually the nickel spot, you are one-on-one with somebody initially. And we just haven't had that breakout guy. And obviously everybody was hoping it was going to be D, and now we'll see what happens with Njigba. But I just feel for the first time I'm comfortable at the slot position. They got to go prove it. We got a rookie and a guy who's been hurt, but at least potentially it's been Burr-Kirven. Ben, before he got hurt, was playing really good football. I didn't realize how fast he was. I kind of shocked me. I knew he was a player. He was a 4-year starter at UW, and all kinds of playmaking ability. He came here. He was a little undersized. I remember when he got hurt. It hurt our team. Now, his injury, it was nearly 2 years ago when Ben Burr-Kirven suffered really a serious injury with his ACL, and they were worried that it was going to actually turn into drop foot. And the reason why, when I saw that, it almost happened to me a year ago. I had surgery on my back because they were so concerned about losing the nerve. And once you learn that nerve, you really don't get it back. And I guess he had some exploratory or something they haven't done very much from a surgery standpoint, and it seems to be successful. John, what do you know about that?
Yeah, he was a guy that, as you said, he was playing really well. He was one of their better special teams players his first 2 years, was having a good training camp in 2021, and then has that knee injury in a preseason game. And, at the time, we were just told torn ACL, which is, it's obviously a serious injury, but you expect a guy to get back the next year from that. And then later on, we find out from Pete Carroll that there's some nerve issues going on. At the end of this past season in January, he was asked about him, and Pete said, they're still working on it. There's this nerve issue. And at that point, you're a year and a half out from the injury. So far, it all seems to be working. And again, it's just great to see a guy who's spent his last 2 years just rehabbing, working 3 different surgeries, see him back out there, getting another chance, and being back out on the field after so long.
Yeah, it's going to be tough for him. But if he could even make it back just onto a practice squad and get another year to get healthy. Again, it's a tough one. When you lose that nerve, it takes time. It can eventually start to work its way back, but it doesn't happen overnight. And, with some of the signings we've had, it's going to be a long road for him. But it's just good to see him back there, and then certainly an opportunity. I think the Seahawks have done such a good job with that. Again, you're watching Seahawks Training Camp Live, powered by Boeing. I'm Paul Moyer, along with Ray Roberts and John Boyle. We're just going to show you what practice is all about. We mentioned one of the big news is that Devon Witherspoon, our fifth pick in the draft in the first round, signed, and he is, I believe, on the practice field today, which really transitions to what some people are saying is the deepest. Let's just look at the safeties. Jamal Adams, we're going to get him back, and he's due. I mean, you can't have that many freak injuries. That we know what he brings to the table. He's the juice he brings. We got to get him on the field. Just to me, he raises everybody's level. Quandre Diggs, we know the Pro Bowler. We got the Julian Love, who was in the trade. Was it trade or free agent?
Free agent.
Thank you. That's why I have you here, John. Really productive last year. And this is a guy, when I saw him in the OTAs, I said, wow, he can cover as well. I mean, the amount of guys who I think could play the nickel position, it's about 5 or 6 guys I think will all compete. And he's a guy, and again, there's a lot of hybrid roles in there. I like Joey Blunt, too. I mean, he played well. He's in the mix. The 7th-round draft pick we got in Jarek Reed the second. Watched him in OTAs. He was playing some nickel at times, and he can cover. Really good feet. And a tough guy. A little undersized, but will be interesting. Somebody that got some time working with the ones, and he's a free agent from Penn State. And that's Jonathan Sutherland. They spoke pretty highly of him in the OTAs. We'll see. A lot of times that happens. Now they got to go out and prove it. Let me flip to the corners. Mentioned Reek Woolen. Get used to that. He's now Reek, not Tyreek. Devon Witherspoon, our first-round pick, the 5th pick in the draft this year. Michael Jackson, who's had a phenomenal offseason. And here's another guy. A lot of people don't realize how fast he is. He ran a 4.4 in the combine when he came out. He played very well last year. He's had really a remarkable offseason, and he's fighting for his spot. Kobe Bryant, who can play corner or nickel, got most of the nickel position last year. Playmaker, always the jump into your second year is where you make that biggest leap. So I'm excited about that. And then 2 guys that, we're probably not going to talk a whole lot from last year, but, Trey Brown 2 years ago was a guy we thought was going to be a legit corner, and I still think he has a chance. I mean, I just don't know how he's recovered from his ACL. And Artie Burns, I watched him 2 years ago at the end of the season, and he was playing pretty well before we got him with the Seahawks. So, you're looking at 12, 13 guys that are going to be competing really deep. I just throw your guys, John, I'll start with you, just your thoughts going into this training camp.
Yeah, I mean, deep is the first word I think of as well. I mean, you just named a ton of guys who have been starters, have starting quality potential. I'll start with the safeties because I love the addition of Julian Love. Did not mean to say love twice there, but hey, we'll go with it. I think a lot of us, when they signed him, kind of raised our eyebrows because he was a pretty big name free agent.
Like about the secondary is that all the dudes back there are guys that can get the ball back to the offense. And I know that's a big deal for Pete is the turnover and getting the balls back to the offense. The other thing is that, was it 2 years ago? I think it was Trey Brown when he played. It was a Pittsburgh game. Remember we had him on the post game, and they interviewed him. He broke down the play.
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't know the slightest bit about playing corner. But when he broke it down the way he broke it down, I felt like I had gone to the master's class of how to do it. So watching you respond and watching some of the other guys that, Jordan Babineau and all those guys respond to how he responded to the question made me a believer in him. So hopefully with his, ACL, with his injury, he can get back to a place where he can really put some pressure on these other guys to compete and fight for this position. Really interested in seeing what Devon Witherspoon brings to the table. Just from the highlights I've seen, he's a big hitter for a smaller-bodied dude, and it looks like Pete is excited about what he can do on the outside and on the inside. Even saying that maybe they get all of them out there. That would be interesting. I feel like Pete. That's going to be a challenge for him this year, is that he wants to do that because he said it. And so it'll be interesting to see how they try to make that happen with all these different dudes out on the field at the same time.
Yeah, I think what they've created, what I'm excited about, this game's changed, and it's changed pretty dramatic over the last few years. I mean, you have to have hybrid players. I mean, there's just so many different formations, how they throw it, just the way the game's evolved and the rules. And so I'm just excited to see how they match things up. You could have almost 7 defensive backs on the field at some point. 6, a lot, depending on how you play your safeties. And, Julian Love could be a safety. Could be a cover guy. We used to call it a 4-2 defense, where it didn't matter the formations. We had guys who could all cover and play defense and play against the run. And the guys they brought in, you go watch Julian Love, He can tackle. He's a tough guy. Witherspoon, he can tackle. Tough guy. Jamal Adams, Diggs. I mean, on and on and on. These guys are complete football players. That's the one where Woolen has the ability to. That, to me, is his biggest thing, because everybody talks about how we got hurt in the run last year. I go, it wasn't so much up the middle. A lot of it was perimeter stuff where they were forcing our corners to have to play in the running game a lot. So I just think, you look at all this stuff, what they can do. So one of the questions that's being thrown out a lot right now is this the deepest, most talented group of players on the Seahawks?
I mean, I would think so. I mean, the dudes are, it's a lot of, like John was just saying earlier, there's a lot of proven dudes that have actually been in the games and played at a very high level. And so when I'm looking at I try to look at the offensive line, but I don't, I think the starting five, especially with Olu in there, could be really special. The defensive end, like rush type guys, Darryl and Ochina. Dang, I just messed his name up 15 times. I think they have some people that can come off the corner. But as from top to bottom, I think the secondary is probably the most talented and the deepest group on the team.
Yeah, I mean, cornerback in particular, like if everyone's healthy come the end of August, early September, you're cutting some really good football players. Like this is going to be one of those years, again, if everybody's healthy, like you're going to have a few guys snapped up off waivers the next day. And look, it's unfortunate for the guys who don't make it, but if you're John Schneider building a roster, that's ultimately the sign that you're doing your job well. I mean, go back obviously to the best teams they've had here, 2013, 2014, you'd have a dozen or so guys that didn't make this team playing around the league the next week. So that's what you want when you're acquiring talent is, that kind of level of competition. I mean, Mike Jackson's a great example. This is a guy that started every game last year, played really well. And then they go out, they draft a cornerback number 5 overall. And I think a lot of fans just assume, okay, there's your new starting left tackle. Mike Jackson, or left cornerback. I mean, Mike Jackson's not giving up a starting job without a fight. He had, as you said, Paul, one of the best off seasons of anybody. I mean, he was just making play after play. And this is a guy last year, he won the starting job and people assumed it was because of injuries and he'd give it back to somebody later on. Artie Burns comes back. They kind of throw him in the competition in practice. Mike Jackson beats him out. Trey Brown comes back. Mike Jackson hangs on to his job still. So, and then we talked about Trey Brown being the guy that, missed a lot of time, but was playing great as a rookie before that injury. So I don't know who it's going to be, who the 3-4 corners getting all the playing time this year is, but it's a great group of guys.
It will be interesting because with Witherspoon and Woolen, you could send guys off the corner. They're so fast, so explosive. Witherspoon is, just his physical nature of how he plays. I mean, you could see our corners actually have a few sacks this year. I mean, again, there's so many things. I would love to be the defensive coordinator for this group of players along the way. It's funny to talk about Trey Brown. I mean, does Trey Brown make the team this year?
Yeah, I mean, talent-wise, you say he should, but again, if everybody's healthy come September, I don't know who the odd man or two out is. I mean, there's so many good corners. We've barely talked about Kobe Bryant. He was starting nickel as a rookie. 4 forced fumbles, made a ton of plays around the ball a lot. So I don't know what it looks like. It's way too soon to predict, but it's these are good problems to have when it comes to building a football team.
Yeah, I mean, I can remember. I want to say it's a couple years ago, but there was a number out of when the Seahawks were like going to the Super Bowl and doing their thing. They had the most players on other teams that were like cut from the Seahawks team that didn't make the team that were on other teams. So that spoke to how deep the talent level is. And it seems as if the Seahawks are back to that type of formula and then bringing in some really talented players and really forcing the issue at positions and making guys have to come and show and prove every day. So this idea of like always compete and earn everything is their little mantra around here. In the secondary, that is definitely the case. And then even speaking to you, Paul, like when you were talking about the guys coming off the corner, I remember last year Pete was saying that Kobe Bryant reminded him of Rondé Barber, who would line up on the in the nickel sometimes and then blitz, and he's very good at it. And so I would imagine that the way Witherspoon plays with the same speed and tenacity, like you could possibly see those types of things of where those two are coming off the corner that way.
Yeah, the Seahawks ranked 13th last year in pass yards allowed, 211 a game. I mean, I expect even bigger jump from 21 to 22. Yeah, I don't know if we're going to play a lot of man. I mean, time will tell. We certainly have the ability to match up with just about anybody. I think a lot of this was to be able to match up with San Francisco. Potentially 7, 8 rookies making the. You got to have guys who can run with those guys along the way. John, again, you're around the team a lot. Do you sense the coaches going into this season? Because this is an interesting year where you had a playoff team last year, and you're looking at potentially 7, 8 rookies making the team this year. And not because – we don't have anybody there, but, they potentially look that good. But, do the coaches is there a step in, a little more pep in their step with this group?
I think a little bit. Starters, all that. You're expecting those guys to take the step forward, and then all these rookies you're bringing in, you love what you're seeing so far, and you're thinking they're going to add a lot. The guys they brought in free agency. I think there's a lot of confidence in both the players and coaches that this is a team on the rise. This is a team that, surprised a lot of people with what they did last year. Was a young team, didn't, get as far as they wanted, but definitely took a big step forward. And I think they see it as that next big step's coming, and a lot of young players are going to be right in the middle of that.
I look at we just talked about potentially the deepest group is the defensive backs. But then I was looking at every position, and I go, where are we not deep? Right. I guess I would flip it. Where do you think is the least deep of any of the groups out there?
I'd say until you get Jordan Brooks back, your inside linebackers, you don't necessarily feel like you've got – I mean, they got some young guys that they obviously like the upside of, they think can play. But in terms of guys that, you've seen prove it at the NFL level, starting caliber guys, beyond Bobby Wagner and Bush, there's, not a lot of guys who've played much. So to me, that's, losing Cody Barton – Jordan Brooks being hurt, that's a position that, once Brooks is back, now all of a sudden you got 3 starting caliber guys for 2 spots. But short term, that's one that maybe I would look at the depth a little bit at.
Yeah, it will be. It'll be interesting because, again, how they match things up. You get Jamal Adams healthy, and now you've got another kind of linebacker.
No, that's a great point.
I think that's the transition. And so you don't need to be maybe as deep as a true linebacker. Sure. I think we got edge rushers. I mean, or outside linebackers more than, we thought going into this season. But we got some proven guys. I mean, Darrell Taylor, for getting, I don't want to use it, he's a pretty productive guy.
Yeah.
He's got to raise his game. He's got to be a complete, every down, linebacker. But the guy can rush the passer now.
Yeah, he does a really good job of bending the corner. I think the time that he spent with Bruce Irving was valuable to him. Just like his approach to pass rushing, learning how to bend the corner. Because before he would get up behind the quarterback and try to come back to him versus like bending into him 2 or 3 yards before the quarterback so you can kind of shorten the distance. I think last year he missed a handful of games and still ended up with 9.5 sacks. And so he's a dude to me that could easily produce 10 to 12 sacks if he could stay on the field and then be able to improve those other areas. Like, against the run, I think it's a little bit of liability. He's not a very heavy guy, so it's a little tougher for him to set the edge. But being able to do that will allow him to be on the field more, and then allow him to be even more productive.
Yeah, and a lot of his production came late in the season. I do think, you mentioned Bruce Irvin. I think that's a great person for him to have spent some time around, of a guy who himself was young. And I think, I'm not speaking out of turn. I think Bruce would be the first to say he was maybe a little immature at times early in his career and kind of had to find himself. And Darrell Taylor probably learned a lot from him. And Bruce Irvin was also really underrated as that run defending, edge setting, outside linebacker type. So if he can pass some of that along, that's great. And then Derek Hall, Boye Mafe, those guys are a little more a little sturdier for that outside linebacker spot, and Uchenna can kind of do it all there. So I really do like that group in terms of they can all do a little bit of different stuff, but they can all get the job done. And then we haven't talked about Tyreek Smith at all because he was hurt his whole rookie year, but I know they're still high on him as well.
Well, we just said that maybe the linebackers are the least deep, but
and then we just named them.
that's what I mean. I go,